Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is the second devlog of Aces and Armour, where we're going to delve into some details in regards to the damage mechanics we've got planned. Of course, any tank game that's trying to go for a realistic damage model has to have a fair amount of detail put into this, as it's, in a way, well, it could be considered one of the main mechanics of the game. Just as a quick recap for those who aren't aware, Aces and Armour is a new game under development. It's essentially a first-person infantry tank and aircraft game where you control fully modeled vehicles with complete interiors and all that kind of stuff. In this video, we're going to touch on the damage mechanics, infantry movement systems, particle effects and smoke and fire simulation, and a bit of the interior modeling. So to begin with, we started with the logic that dictates the behavior of a shell upon impact, such as the angle at which it ricochets, which is of course dependent upon the ammunition type and how much energy the shell has. You can see how we're experimenting with the variables and how it would work. So as we're working with the Panzer IV now, we're getting down the logic with the Kanonengranate-Rotpanzer, or more commonly referred to as the 75mm APC-BC HE shell. Luckily, with the help of Edda 320, our historical advisor, we've got access to excellent resources that go over its penetration at different distances, velocity. Honestly, the more details we have, the more accurately we can model it. So, of course, this Panzer IV with the short 75 is predominantly to be used with high explosive rounds as an infantry support tool, rather than an anti-tank weapon, as its shells sport good explosive filler but not the best ballistics, mainly of course due to the barrel being pretty short. So now we have a system of dynamic shrapnel produced by the shell. The amount of shrapnel produced will depend on the amount of energy the shell has, and of course the time that the shell has been traveling, and the amount of armor penetrated before penetration. Those are the primary factors affecting how much shrapnel is produced. Past this point, the bits of metal are simulated in real time and have the ability to damage components such as crewmen, optics, all that kind of stuff inside the tank. Each piece of shrapnel has the ability to subtract a certain amount of HP. Let's just take minus 30 HP as an example. And then each component inside the tank also has an HP value. So if we say the crewman has an HP of 100, again, these numbers are arbitrary and are not indicative of what we'll actually go with. He'll be injured if he's struck, but it would require 3 pieces of shrapnel to hit him to actually kill him. The shrapnel also has the ability to ricochet after hitting stuff inside the tank, allowing it to bounce around, although it will lose energy and thus won't do quite as much damage to whatever it hits if it's ricocheted. This system of keeping track of individual pieces of metal in real time can also easily be applied to stuff like spool or rivets. Riveting was used quite a lot in these early days of tank design, and of course, something else which is riveting, our Patreon page. Patrons are essentially making this game possible, and they'll get access to early game builds, one-on-one conversations with the devs, a unique vehicle when the game releases, which the patrons will actually vote on what it'll be, and even early multiplayer testing alongside the devs, which we'll be doing next week. Our goal is to get 1,000 patrons, so even if every one of our subscribers right now became a patron, we'd be almost 50% of the way there, and be able to go full steam ahead on development. So if you like what we're doing, and you really want a game like this, please consider supporting us. And of course, a huge thanks to our current patrons, the Late Bird 7, Yanis, Duke, and William Brooks. So yeah, Spall. Modeling Spall is essentially about modeling the tiny bits of the actual tank's armor which are dislodged and sent flying through the tank by the impact of a shell or bullet. These can be as deadly as the shrapnel from the shell itself. In riveted tanks, in which armor plates are riveted to an internal frame rather than being welded together, the individual rivets would often pop out under the sheer force of the armor plate being struck by a shell, and these rivets flying around the tank could sometimes be more deadly than the shell itself, as you've essentially got nuts and bolts flying around like bullets inside the tank. Riveted construction for tanks did start to go out of favor early in World War II, basically for this reason. In fact, something that illustrates this point, Otto Carius, the World War II German tank commander, I'm sure many of you will be familiar with him, has a super interesting quote on this very point.
Es ging wie ein geölter Blitz. Ein Treffer gegen unseren Panzer, ein metallischer Knall, der Schrei eines Kameraden, das war's. Ein großes Stück der Panzerung war neben dem Sitz des Funkers durchschlagen worden. Zum Aussteigen brauchten wir keinen Befehl. Erst als ich mir im Graben neben der Straße kauernd mit der Hand über das Gesicht fuhr, merkte ich, dass es mich auch erwischt hatte. Unser Funker hatte seinen linken Arm verloren. Wir verfluchten den spröden und unelastischen tschechischen Stahl, der russischen 47 mm Panzerabwehrkanone so wenig entgegenzusetzen hatte. Die Trümmer unserer eigenen Panzerung und die umherfliegenden Bolzen waren viel verheerender als die Splitter des Geschosses selbst.
The tank he was commanding at the time, the Panzer 38T, was made using the traditional riveted construction. As you can see, all those little bumps along the edge of the plates are rivets. And as he described, those things popping off due to the impact of the anti-tank gun did more damage than the shell itself. So modeling these as part of the damage model is definitely important to getting a realistic system. Part of the damage model is of course how the crew then is able to repair damage. This is going to vary somewhat on a tank-by-tank basis, but the crew in the Panzer IV have the equipment and supplies necessary to do repairs on the tracks, engine, all that kind of stuff. However, they will actually have to get out and open the engine deck or, get down by the tracks to repair. So it's not really something you can do when you're out in the open with enemies shooting at you. In terms of the list of things that can actually be damaged, we're of course implementing all the standard stuff like gun barrel, crew members, breech, turret ring, engine ammunition, but we're also going for stuff like the battery, optics, fuel tanks, stuff that you wouldn't necessarily consider until you're inside the tank and you realize how important they are. If there are any other additions to the damage model you'd want to see, feel free to let us know in the comments. Hudson, one of our devs who's been focusing on the infantry side of things, has recently implemented motion matching into the character's animation, which is basically a system that dynamically blends pre-existing animations in a way it looks supernatural. And honestly, the results look really, really good. This is a really early implementation, so it's only going to get better from here. Roberto, our lead dev, has also been looking at various weather systems. Just some minor details that add some cool things like water actually dripping down the side of the tank when it's raining, which honestly I like this effect a lot more than I anticipated. It's really realistic looking. Similar stuff for snow, where we've got snowy terrain, the tank will of course accordingly look like it's in its environment. On the note of particle simulation, we've also been looking at implementing Embergen, which essentially allows very, very realistic smoke and fire effects. And hopefully before too long we'll be able to add this for stuff like the exhaust smoke and smoke that happens when you fire weapons. On a final note, the interior of the Panzer IV is nearing completion, and I'm super excited to show this off in the next devlog, by which time we plan to be able to show off some mechanics of the tanks being operated from the inside, and of course we'll show more of the interior then. Until then, we're going to be doing some multiplayer tests over the coming days and weeks with the devs and patrons. So if you needed another reason to join the Patreon, there you go. So yeah, that's pretty much an overview of what we've got going on now. If you'd like to join the Discord server or support on Patreon, both the links are in the pinned comment and description. If you're enjoying this kind of content, please like and subscribe. Until next time.